Welcome back to the eSports Report Daily Update. I'm Chris Puckett here live in our New York City studio. It is Thursday, April 3rd, and we are still talking Call of Duty Championships. Now, today's moral of the story is compLexity and how freaking awesome they are. Here to talk about the amazing team that won $400,000 this past weekend are my good buddies from ESN. We have Scott, the GM of Esports Nation, and over at eSports Live, we have Mike Leatherberry. I can't even talk here, guys. I'm all tongue twisted. We're going to drink some water up in this business. How you guys doing? Welcome back.
What's going on?
Well, we talked about the upcoming Season 2 and what that means for the MLG Call of Duty League. But now it's time to talk about the biggest tournament of the year. It just went down in LA, and the team that was crowned world champions at the end of the weekend was compLexity. Scott, let's start with you. At the very start, we saw compLexity matching up against some very ferocious squads in group play. They went up against Vex Revenge, who ended up finishing in the top 8. Real All-Stars, the top squad from the Netherlands, with two incredible players from the UK. And Orbit, who is kind of a surprise squad coming into this one. Orbit looked very strong in group play, but actually finished near the bottom of that group. Were you thinking coming into this one it would be an easy sweep for compLexity? Did anyone surprise you here in this group?
No, not at all. I mean, the group played out as it was meant to be. I think compLexity really did not struggle one bit. They lost actually one of the 4 maps. They lost all tournament against Orbit. It was the game 2 S&D, but I was actually standing directly behind them as they were doing it, and it was the third game that they had played in group play, so they had already clinched their group. And they, you know how they are, as TP said on stage over the weekend, they're delusionally cocky, I think was the word he said.
Confident, yeah.
Delusionally confident, yeah. So they, after they knew they were already in, I don't know, something about that S&D, they really weren't even calling out. And I think that the Orbit kind of caught them off guard, and they actually lost that game 6-1.
What happened after they lost that game?
After they lost that game, they won Warhawk Blitz 19-9. And Octane Dom by 30 points. So, yeah, I think every once in a while, they're just so good that they kind of coast every once in a while. But when they're forced to, they're able to flip that switch and just dominate. And that's pretty much exactly what they did in group play. I mean, the All-Stars, they 3-0'd them with relative ease. They won by domination by 92 points, Blitz by 16. And then Vex Revenge, it was kind of a close series, but they swept them anyway. They won Dom by a lot. S&D, they won 6-4, and then Blitz, they won by 2. But as we all saw, they 3-0'd their group and easily, clinched one of those top 8 seeds heading into Saturday.
They looked really strong. And, Michael, we saw kind of the top squad of Real All-Stars face off against them on the main stage. What did you think about compLexity's matchup there? And do you think any European team right now can match up with compLexity?
No European team can. We expected them to go a little bit further than they did. So when TCM got knocked out, that was a little bit disappointing, especially not to see any of them in the finals. Nothing really surprises you with compLexity at all. I mean, they play so well. They slay, and that's all they do really well. And any of them are capable of going in and playing the objective or just turning around and trading kills.
Right.
Obviously, they're a little weak in search and destroy, but I think that has to do with their play style more than anything. Like I said, they slay so well and they trade kills, but in the end, that can sometimes hurt you in search and destroy. They didn't drop very many maps. Like Scott said, they dropped 4 maps total. They lost, and of those 4, 3 of them were search and destroy maps.
Pretty surprising there because, when I watch compLexity, I think, wow, they got these strats down. These guys have been practicing it, and when it comes to a one-on-one battle, you just don't expect any of them to lose that. But it was really awesome to watch these guys in Respawn, and these guys are by far the best team in Respawn. We'll get to the stats breakdown a little bit later, but first, let's take a look back at what compLexity has done since last year's Call of Duty Championship, where they fell just short to Optic in that Round 11 Game 5, to now. They have taken down everyone. MLG Anaheim, we have first place finish. Gfinity, the first event over there for Black Ops 2, they win first place against who? TCM. UMG Atlanta, they dominate that tournament before going on to the PAX Prime Invitational, and this is where they started looking a little bit vulnerable to me. They slacked off in group play, barely made it out of the groups, and they went all the way to the finals, losing to Unite Gaming. Gfinity 2, though, it was a wake-up call. They came back, crushed that tournament first, Full Sail Invitational, taking first out of the group of 4 there. Win over to France, won ESWC, MLG Columbus, the first tournament for Call of Duty Ghost. Switch out a player, doesn't matter, another first place finish at UMG Philly, and then a huge wake-up call at US Championships where they dropped to strictly business before bouncing back and taking the 2014 Call of Duty Championship. So, pretty interesting run here. The only 2 losses in that whole list of 11 tournaments were at PAX Prime Invitational and at the US Championship where they lost to Strictly Business. Let's first look at this team at Unite Gaming, and I want you guys to kind of talk me through how this team was able to take down compLexity. Embos, Nameless, Parasite, and Ricky. When you look at it on paper, it's actually a pretty strong squad, but I think overall that squad strength may be search and destroy. Scott, who was it on Unite, and what was it about Unite that you think gave Cole trouble?
I mean, as you said, the whole roster itself was extremely talented. They won the whole event. They, in the finals, it was actually, everyone was pretty shocked when they defeated compLexity because they had only won the 3 events prior to that, but they had won it in such convincing fashion and in such a way that it seemed like they could never be beaten again. And Unite was able to take them down, like you said, with the S&D. Every single one of the players on that team, Parasite, Nameless, Ricky, and Embos, are gods at S&D. So that was, honestly, if there's a way to beat compLexity, it's through S&D. You have to steal a respawn, which is the hardest thing to do. But, yeah, S&D, if you win your S&Ds against them, obviously out of every best of 5, there's 2 S&Ds. You can win both of them. You steal a respawn. That's the only way you're going to be able to defeat them. But obviously the difficult part is being able to steal that respawn and keeping up with compLexity. I think one of the reasons they're quote unquote weak at S&D, if you could even call it that, is that their intensity level is kind of, put on the back burner when they're playing S&D because you can't really play like that in S&D. You have to be more methodical. You have to play a little bit slower. You have to think more. But in a respawn, when they're just go, 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 their gun skill and their communication makes it really impossible. So I don't know what they could do to change that. But yeah, I mean, Unite, that team, it was really sad that I think later in that week they had dropped Embos like after they won. And everyone's like, what?
And there became Curse Las Vegas. We know how that story turned out. Scott, let's talk a little bit about this second squad, though, that beat compLexity in the only 2 tournaments that compLexity lost. They did finish second. Scott, we had the boys from Strictly Business shock everyone, but most importantly, they shocked compLexity twice down in your hometown while we were down in Florida. What was it about this SB squad that you think worked against compLexity?
You're throwing it to me or Mike?
Oh, sorry, Mike. Yes.
Yeah, my hometown is Florida. You want me?
Yes, definitely. If I could read my paper, I'd throw it to the right person. Mike, your turn.
TP went on the other night and they said that, the big change is that Strictly Business played a way faster paced game than what they were used to. They weren't used to that. A lot of teams play very passive against compLexity just due to the fact of their slaying ability. The trading kills is a must against them. And I think when Strictly Business went after them like they did in the slaying department as well as pushing them, they came out on top and they did it in convincing fashion. It wasn't just an easy breeze through for them at all. I was incredibly impressed with their gun skill, with their ability on the respawns, as well as their rotations. Trading, like I said, trading kills is a big thing when it comes to compLexity. And if you can get 2-3 of them down at a time and kick them off their game, you've got a good head start and a good chance at winning.
Absolutely, and I like the pointing there towards the aggression. And Strictly, TP did kind of talk about this last night on Live on 3. If you guys missed it, make sure you go check out the VOD on Twitch. They do a phenomenal job there with Slasher and DJ Wheat. But I was really kind of surprised in both of those losses. They weren't the squads that you would think would take out compLexity. I want to know if you're building a roster right now after watching the Call of Duty Championship, if you're planning for Season 2, in your guys' opinion, what is going to be the greatest strength? What do you want to build around as a team's core to try and take out the reigning champions right now?
I'm going to say that you want to start with, I don't think you're going to be able to match their intensity, but you kind of have to keep up with it in a way. So you're going to need someone who's able to get loud. And for me, like on SB, Sensor is a guy who's like, he's screaming in the booth. And again, going back to the S&D thing, if you could find a team who's grinds S&D like 2v2s and 3v3 tournaments on GB, not just in general. Obviously, you're going to need a pro player with experience and a lot of gun skill and stuff like that. You can't just pick anyone off the GB to beat complexity. But I think that's definitely the two kind of things you want to match, because it's really tough to beat them at their own game, as we've seen. But I mean, just going off of what we spoke, I think Strictly Business got really, really hot at the right time, and they were unstoppable at Full Sail. And this past weekend, they had their struggles for sure. They still finished in fourth, despite no means a bad thing. But I mean, we had them going to the finals, so we had high hopes for them, and I think if you spoke to them, they'd say that they were very disappointed with their placement. But yeah, I think once again, S&D intensity, you're not going to be able to outslay them, I don't think.
And here's a look at that Strictly Business roster. Of course, that was Sensor, Doug Martin, who like you said, one of the loudest guys in the game. Saints, better known as Renato, Dito, and Apathy were that lineup. And it was kind of a misfit squad in a lot of people's opinions coming into the event. But I love what you're saying here, the intensity in the search and destroy game. But is there anything specifically about Ghost? Is it long-range ARs? We see more SMGs than ever being used here. Is there an exact opposite of complexity right now, or is there an equal counter that you could create to the players like TP, Crim6, Aches, and Karma?
I think that if you're going to go after complexity as a team, then you need to play their game. Their strategies and going into a lot of the maps are entirely different from what other teams do. And something that they do far better than anybody else is adapt. When they played Optic, right? So when they were at Full Sail, they got down, it was 5-0, I believe, is what they were at. They were getting ready to get 6-0'd in the finals. And all of a sudden, they just come roaring back. They just start slaying them all over the place in Search and Destroy. And they came back to win it. And that's the thing, is they adapt to the other team. They play to their weakness. It might take them a minute to find it, but they'll eventually find it, and they'll exploit it to its fullest extent. So picking a squad to compete with them is extremely difficult. You've got some great players out there that are extremely, extremely smart, but to bet against complexity and to go strictly after them would almost be a fool's game, I think.
And yeah, to backpack off of that, if I can intercede right now, is
For sure.
Everyone, as we saw after Philly, tried to build a god squad, and everyone tried to team with the best possible player who might not specifically they might not work together in set roles. Complexity's biggest strength is that they have been together for this long. They stick it out, and they work on their issues. Obviously, they made the move with Clayster and Karma, but that was a decision based on, like they said, they want to be around people that they could hang out with. And if you see them at the event, they're always together. Anytime you see them at an event, and I remember seeing them last year at Anaheim. I saw Aches, TP, and Crim always together, eating lunch together, hanging out together in between matches, and Clayster is off doing his own thing. And if you talk to them, that was their main reasoning for making that move. I know it shocked everyone. It shocked me. Like, why would you drop someone after winning that many events in a row?
Right, someone who constantly is performing as well on the main stage.
Yeah, Clay was arguably one of the MVPs of Black Ops 2. So they made a lot of waves with that decision, but it's worked out for them. They've won 2 out of the 3 events that they've been to, and the biggest event of the year. So I mean, I just wish that teams would stick together and stick it out more. Like, I would love to see this SV team stick together and work through it and just like grow together and become more of a unit, instead of just teaming with people who you think are good at the game. There is definitely that friendship angle. Yeah. And that chemistry that comes with it, and if the complexity is living proof of that.
I think we actually saw the opposite this year when we look at Curse Las Vegas. We saw a few other teams, the mix of Optic Gamings that were going around where they just went after all-star players and just couldn't figure out the balance. And then I think Envy is another testament of just finding that squad that likes to play together, that likes to grind together, because they didn't have any real flashy superstars on that lineup. No one thought Rambo and Merc still had it in the tank, and they proved everyone wrong with the second-place finish. So I'm backing you up on that one. I hope that we see some stability, but I think everyone in this Call of Duty community knows it's not going to happen, Scott.
Not going to happen one bit. I think, after PAX, we're going to see. I think after UMG Philly was the most activity we've ever seen with the high volume of players moving around, plus big name players to big name teams making changes. I don't know if it'll be as ridiculous this time around, but it's still going to be. I've been hearing some rumblings, and there's going to be some definite excitement in the people on Twitter just eat it up, man. And it's gonna be fun to see.
I think I have 3 shows ready to go. As soon as the teams make it official, and as soon as their sponsors are aware of the moves that are coming, we can talk about it. But until then, let's stay on the line of complexity now, and we're supposed to do this at the start of the show. The graphics are ready now. Let's take a look at the run complexity made throughout that Call of Duty Championship. Of course, they went through that Pool B. They took out Vex Revenge. They took out Orbit. They took out Real All-Stars, and they made it into the upper bracket with a very high seed. Ron, when you have it ready, let's bring it up. There we go. You can see complexity at the bottom. We'll light this one up for you. They ran up against TCM, which everyone thought was going to be an epic series. This was going to go to a Game 5. Complexity shutting that down, 3-0ing Xfinity, and then going on to beat FaZe before meeting up with Optic Gaming in the finals of the winners bracket there. Let's talk first, though, about that TCM matchup. Going into it, I know everyone was pretty much thinking Complexity is going to take it, but how far did you guys think it would go?
I thought it would at least go to a Game 5. TCM was the favorite coming out of Europe, and they were playing really, really well on Friday. And going into complexity, TCM has a really, really good slaying ability as well, but they just got demolished. I don't know whether it was because of the time of day or they were jet lagged or whatever they'd like to say, but it was not a pretty sight. And after that they fell off and eventually got knocked out of the tournament.
So TCM kind of fell from there. Scott, I saw Mad Cat was kind of going big. What do you think it was in that matchup for TCM and Complexity? Where do you think TCM fell short to Complexity in this matchup?
Well, I mean, they got swept 3-0. They got outslayed pretty much every step of the way. Mad Cat had a pretty big backpack this weekend. Strictly looking at kill-death ratio, he had a 1.36, which is
enormous.
It's really big in competitive play. And the closest one next on the team was Moose with 1.13, which isn't bad at all. But Mad Cat was shouldering a lot of the load. Let me just take a look here at the box scores. We see in that match, it was Octane Domination. TCM lost by 28, so that wasn't very close. It was the closest out of the 3, though. Search and Destroy, they lost 6-2, and then Warhawk Blitz 10-5. And Crim 6 just went crazy in that Blitz. I mean, I had really high hopes for TCM. I did. We actually picked them to finish, I think, 5th out of the whole pool. So the fact that no European teams made it into the top 8 was a shock, but the fact that they didn't really was kind of a shock and disappointment. But they spent a lot of time at the Envy House, and I remember seeing, I think it was Nameless said after playing them on LAN for a while that TCM, if they were in the United States, would be a top 5 team. And I could actually see that they just didn't perform against Complexity. I think if they ran into any other team in the tournament at that stage, they would have had more luck. But Complexity was obviously men on the mission this weekend, so they just they took care of business against them.
Yeah, they made it look real easy. It's got to let you get your stats ready for this next one before we talk about FaZe and Complexity. I asked you guys on Twitter during the commercial break, what do you think it would take to beat Complexity and dethrone them? They said absolutely no prize money, but I think that's a cop-out. I think Complexity plays for pride equally as much as they say they play for money, and I think we've seen that just in online tournaments. They hate losing. When they are playing in a $1,000 or $200 online tournament, they are still playing all the way. They're going 10 out of 10, balls to the walls, just trying to outslay their opponent and make it clear that they're the number one squad in the world. So that reply, I'm going to throw it out, but I do like some of these answers. They say that you have to have Slayers to beat them. And Scumpy and Clay are two of the biggest players that a lot of people would put on their list. I saw multiple responses to this one. So keep your responses coming in. I'm at MLG Puckett. You can let us know at MLG as well. What roster would you put together to beat compLexity? Let's move on now to their second round of that upper bracket as Cole first took out TCM, one of the top teams, in fact, the top team in Europe. Then they faced off against Xfinity here, and that was a 3-0. Muddog said his shot was off. It was just a team effort that failed. But in round 3, they faced off in a matchup that everyone was looking forward to. The last time these two teams met up, FaZe and compLexity went all the way to Game 5, and that's because FaZe struck first blood. Not only that, they also went on to win the second game of Search and Destroy. This time around, they were not the same, as Cole looked like a new squad that was absolutely prepared for this FaZe lineup. Scott, what was different about COD Champs in this matchup for you?
FaZe, hold on, let me take a look at their stats right now. FaZe in that matchup specifically, Classic really struggled.
Yeah.
I'm looking at everyone else was somewhat even. Classic went -12 in the Dom. And they only lost the Dom by 7 points, which is kind of an accomplishment against compLexity. Proofy played out of his mind all weekend, but it just wasn't enough. They won the S&D 6-1, and it really was not that close. Classic came up big in that one, going 11-6. Proofy 8-1 with 4 plants, and that was, I think, the most one-sided and against their favor match that compLexity had all weekend. But again, right back at it with Blitz. Once they get back to the respawn, they flip that switch. They won that game 15-8. Wasn't very close at all again. And then Octane Domination to close them out, they won by 28 points. So, I mean, just looking at the numbers, I don't know what was. FaZe is I think most people consider one of the better S&D teams in the game. And they proved it with that game too, but I don't know, man. It's just it's difficult to say like who could beat these guys, what it takes to beat them. They just don't lose. They don't lose in respawn, and that's what makes them so utterly dominant. Yeah, it was tough. FaZe.
It was tough. Well, Michael, in that next round, we saw Optic Gaming go up against compLexity, and this was a matchup that I don't think anyone expected other than the Green Wall fans. Optic went all the way to the upper bracket final, and there they kind of shocked us once again. They won a round 11 on Freight, and they took compLexity all the way to game number 5, but what was really surprising was their ability to hang in the respawn game modes. We saw them hang toe-to-toe with them in Blitz, as Optic really had almost equally strong defense in that Blitz game. Were you surprised by Optic's strength in that matchup, Michael?
Yeah, when they were hanging with them toe-to-toe, especially in the respawn and as well as the Blitz game, I mean, everybody knows that that's what compLexity does best, is Blitz as far as Ghost is concerned. Their Blitz game is unbelievable. I think that they score 2-1 over every team in blitzes. So, their average is, I think, an 11 blitz captures in each map. So to go with them and go toe-to-toe was pretty awesome as far as the Green Wall is concerned. That's definitely something to be proud of. And Optic constantly gives them trouble. Even before they picked up Clayster, they were always giving them trouble. Back at MLG Full Sail last October, that was something that nobody expected them to do at all. And they had them. They were within an inch of taking that title there, and then they dropped it. And then the same thing happened again this time around. Obviously, extremely disappointing for the Green Wall, but given the circumstances of the last time that they met in that situation, it isn't exactly surprising. When Optic gets down and they start getting outslayed and they start getting outplayed, you can see their energy slowly dissipating. Scumpy plays off of everybody's energy. When he gets going and he starts slaying, he's unstoppable. I mean, he is just unbelievable in his ways. And Clayster tries to keep them as hyped as possible and does a really good job of that. But sometimes it just isn't enough. And compLexity, regardless of the situation, whether they're up, up 30 points or whether they're down 30 points, they'll find a way, and they always do.
Well, we saw Optic go up 2-1 after that big win on Freight and then after the Blitz, but Game 4 was domination. We're actually showing you some highlights here from TP's second side. Now, Scott, I know you have all those stats in front of you, but TP's stats in game number 4 were a shocker for me. We knew this guy could slay, but he opened things up 16-4 on that second side.
Yeah, TP's really incredible as a player to think about, because everyone always knew him as the objective player, and that's the role he played to this weekend by a long shot.
Mm-hmm.
But his slaying ability in Ghosts has just multiplied. He's always been that kind of he would always have the negative KD, but a ton of objective play. Now he's able to do both at the same time, which makes him unbelievably lethal and obviously one of the best players in the game. When it comes to overall, he had, as far as the OBJ play goes, he had 104 total objectives. Next best on the team was Aches with 75. So he obviously slid back into that role a little bit more so, but he still put up a 1.13 KD, which is very solid.
Oh, that's great.
And in that domination, he finished. He finished 27-19. He had that huge first side, kind of came back where Optic pushed the limit in the second side on Sovereign domination, but compLexity was able to win that game by 18. And yeah, but when you get a first side lead like that and someone is doing so well, like 16-4 is pretty unheard of when it comes to a respawn. So the fact that he was able to put up those numbers, I think definitely, as Mike said, took the wind out of Optic's sails a little bit. And because they had won the 2 prior games before that by 8-7 Blitz and 6-5, obviously in that crazy push on Freight S&D, they had a lot of momentum. And then TP was like, no, I'm not going to have that anymore, and just took over in that first side, and it was kind of all over from there. Well,
we saw in Game 5 after that, TP and the boys shut it down in Search and Destroy. TP opened up 5-1, but it was Crim6's perfect game. He went 11-0, and here's a highlight here in that final round. Crim going up, everyone else rushing over to A, and just watch Crim6 on that mini-map on the flank, coming around from behind, causing a distraction. Clayster picking up 1, so they actually got first blood at Optic Gaming, but it was just a team effort from compLexity as they were able to come back and take that game 6-0. From there, Optic Gaming fell to the lower bracket, and they lost to Envy in another very close series, and Optic was knocked out. But for compLexity to be able to just bounce back after being down 2-1 and then shutting out the last 2, the second half of Dom being down 18 points and then going into that that S&D and winning 6-0, that's where I knew they were going to win the tournament. The moment I saw that, I knew no one was going to beat compLexity in this tournament. What made them so good at that Warhawk, and where did Optic fall apart in that Game 5?
The slaying, that was one thing that, like I said before, they weren't trading kills at all, and it seemed like compLexity was able to get in between players and get them alone. So instead of trading kills and getting down to 2-2 and then 1-2, where Optic is actually really good, they were able to pick them off one by one and eventually just take them apart. It obviously didn't help that Crim6 was 11-0. So I mean, the man was just unstoppable. He wasn't going to drop, and he was just I believe a couple times they actually got into the spawn and got out from behind them and ended up getting taken out a couple times as well.
Yeah, Crimbot was full-on Terminator mode, and they shut the door on that one. They closed out the tournament with a 3-0 sweep on Envy. Guys, I want to thank you so much for coming on and kind of breaking down the story of compLexity in this tournament, where we have TP lined up to come on the show next. But before I let you guys go, do you have any other ridiculous stats or anything else you wanted to say about compLexity?
Go ahead, Scott. I'll let you go first.
All right, thanks. For just the fact that they went 24-4, they went 11-0 on domination, 6-3 on search, and 7-1 on blitz.
One blitz loss.
One blitz loss, which I believe was to They
Optic
lost the
Gaming.
Blitz to Optic, yeah, the 8-7 in the winners final. So one incredible stat, which I actually was pointed out by Aches on Twitter the other day, which I love. All these websites. Obviously, we do a lot of stats, but other sites do them as well. It's a great thing to have these at our disposal. Aches went back and looked and found out at Columbus they did not lose one search and destroy. At UMG Philly they did not lose one blitz.
Right.
And at the COD Championships they didn't lose one domination. That's crazy. Like the fact that they are able to play solidly in any game type. Like we keep harping on them for their struggles in S&D, but they still went 6-3. They still had a 67 win percentage in the game type. So that's really the only chink in their armor. But you honestly can't even call it that because they're great at every single thing they play. Yeah. So I mean, they're easily the best team in the world, and they have the title now to back it up. So
the only squad I've ever seen throw a perfect tournament was 2007's final boss at the national championship. PAX could be the weekend for compLexity. They have a perfect series in Search and Destroy. They have a perfect tournament in Blitz. We just saw the perfect domination. Michael, what are the chances? Do you think they could have a perfect run coming into PAX?
Absolutely. I mean, they're coming off this win. They're extremely confident. They are just playing out of their mind, and they have no reason not to at this point. They tweeted out the other day, what can we do next? What's there to do? And this is it. It's just to keep going and to build that dynasty. It's not about the prize money anymore. It's nothing more than an ego boost for them, and that's what they like. They are the villains of Call of Duty, and they fill that role so well. So I think as long as they continue to play that, and they continue to play to their strengths, they're only going to get better. We're talking about team changes now, but we know compLexity isn't going anywhere. So while all these other teams are going to switch it up after PAX, these guys are going to stay together, and they're going to pick up, their subs as well to get their game even stronger. So I don't think compLexity is going anywhere anytime soon, and it's going to take a God squad essentially to tear them apart, but I just don't think it's feasible at all.
It's going to be tough. We'll see how all these team changes shake up. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. Once again, that is Michael Leatherberry from eSports Live. And, of course, we have Scott Dew, better known as Mountain Dew, the GM of eSports Nation. Make sure you check out both of those sites. We're going to a quick commercial break. When we return, I'm going to be drinking some cola with my good buddy Teepee right here on the ESR Daily.